Hello and welcome to Conscious Living. My name is Mark Curran, and we air every Wednesday here in Vancouver on 100.5 FM CFRO in Vancouver Co-op Radio. Today, I'm always excited to be with my co-host and partner from the Spirit Plant Medicine Conference, Mr. Stephen Gray. Welcome, Stephen. Welcome to the program.
Hey,
always
Mark.
a pleasure to connect with you. And, today it's funny because a couple of weeks ago we did a show called well, it was for Spirit Plant Medicine, and it was based on Psychedelics Day, and it was how psychedelics have helped transform or change your life. And today, I know it was a last minute invitation for you, but we had an opportunity to speak with the founders and the team at the World Psychedelics Day to really discuss their mission. So today we're excited to bring in Mark Akbar, who's the founder. We have Shannon Smedella, who's the Operations and Partners Director. We have Dr. Sandra Dreisbach, who's the Ethics Director. And we have Sarah Butterfield, the Creative Director. Welcome to the program, everyone.
Hi there.
Hello.
Thank you. Welcome.
Does it matter that my screen says recording paused?
Yeah, mine does as well.
Sorry to raise
No, but because we're live, it doesn't matter. We're doing it in a different way. So we'll edit that out when we come down to our next part of the program.
Sorry.
All right. Well, Stephen, we had a great show with the topic of how psychedelics have changed your life. And here we are now almost a month later, a few weeks later, with the team from World Psychedelics Day. So maybe we can start by just having everybody introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about who you are and how you got involved in World Psychedelics Day.
Sandra, do you want to start?
Sure. I feel like I should have Mark start, but at least I'm the last joining. I'll just say I'm Dr. Sandra Dreisbach. I do work in psychedelics and consciousness ethics, and I'm the most recent joiner of the team, and I support ethical practice and education and awareness for World Psychedelics Day. But I'll pass to Mark, who founded the day.
Well, I'm a filmmaker by trade and a documentary filmmaker, and I got involved in several documentaries about psychedelics after I had discovered them rather late in life. And when I was about 45, some friends said, "Mark, I think it's time you went to a rave and took ecstasy." And and that was a transformative moment and led to a lot of research and investigation. And in the beginning of the pandemic, I was sitting around like everybody else in front of their computer, and a couple of friends of mine, one of my friends, Ria Mehta, invented Global Smoothie Day, and another friend created a World Elephant Day, and that went on to become a UN recognized day. And I just thought psychedelics were an important part of my life, and I felt that there was a lot of unnecessary stigma attached to them, and I thought, well, why not World Psychedelics Day? And why not trying to get it recognized by the United Nations? And that started us off on this kind of crazy mission, and remarkably, it's catching on globally.
Somebody? Shannon?
Awesome. Thank you.
Shannon, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure, yeah, definitely. So my background is about 2 decades of business management, strategy, operations. Interestingly, I don't normally get to say my spiritual side because I'm normally on business related topics, but I figure since we're on Conscious Living Radio, I can also mention that I am a Reiki master, yoga teacher of about 17 years, and trained with the Chopra Center, and actually an Akashic reader. So I interestingly found psychedelics through meditation. And I'm very excited to say that the first ever conference I ever went to related to psychedelics was spirit plant medicine. I believe it was back in 2016. Yeah. And then just ended up making some connections and joined the volunteer team for MAPS, eventually moved on to the board of MAPS. So I've been in that whole realm of psychedelics for about 8 years. But like Mark was saying, back in 2021, when everyone was just sitting around, I remember a friend of mine, Mark Hayden, introduced me to Mark Akbar, and he said, a friend of mine has this crazy idea. It's called World Psychedelics Day. I think you'd be able to help. And obviously knew Mark Hayden through MAPS, and I said, sure, why not? So jumped onto that bandwagon and have been on it ever since. So yeah, definitely just love helping out behind the scenes with World Psychedelics Day and just helping to make everything happen on the business background end. But that said, conscious business background end is really what we're aiming for.
Lovely. Thank you. Sarah, would you like to introduce yourself? Sarah, you froze on us, apparently.
She seems to be frozen, yeah.
Yeah, you're frozen.
Well, we must have lost her.
We'll have to come back to you, Sarah. I don't know if you can hear us at the moment. So in that case, we'll come back to you, Sarah, if you can hear us now, and if you can't, we'll wait. In any case, we'll wait until you're unfrozen. And in the meantime, let's discuss this in some more depth. So I think from the things that the three of you have said so far, the mission, which actually I asked you about before we started live anyway, but is somewhat self-evident, but maybe you could go into a little more depth about that. What are the primary goals of World Psychedelics Day? Maybe Mark, again, you probably should start with this one. Yeah.
Well, sure. Yeah, our main goal is to promote research and education about the benefits and risks of using psychedelics, and to advocate for policy changes to support their medical use, and to honor the traditional and indigenous practices around these substances. Essentially, our hope is to reduce the stigma and that the war on drugs has created, and encourage informed discussions, and to help build a kind of an umbrella, all-embracing organization that a day that helps to build a sense of a global community that supports the safe and ethical integration of psychedelics into modern healthcare and into our lives more generally. And so we chose June 20th. It rhymes with 420. That wasn't the main idea, but it happened. It was the solstice, and we didn't want to tie it into a particular like bicycle day around a particular person in the psychedelic field. So we thought, the longest, brightest day of the year, and we're encouraging. We're trying to shine a bright light on the therapeutic, cultural, and scientific importance of psychedelics.
Lovely, yeah. And just to be clear, well, actually, even for myself, but particularly for people who might watch this discussion we're having, did the idea originate in your fevered brain, Mark?
Somehow.
Okay, just credit where credit's due, as it were.
But we're all just channeling greater force.
Yeah, there you go. It wasn't me. Yeah. Okay, so Sarah, we didn't get to hear your introducing yourself yet. I think you might need to unmute yourself.
Um, my
There you are.
phone, my phone overheated and it suddenly shut down. Yeah, I'm an artist, graphic designer, writer. I've been working with Mark since the beginning of WPD. You know, sort of imagining the potential of this project. For me, I just find the whole question of how psychedelics help the mind as tools of perception to go further, to perhaps be kinder, to be more elucidated, to be more open, a very interesting issue. And now that, you know, that the landscape is opening for research, for including indigenous knowledge, for including therapeutic wisdom, it's become a very interesting terrain for consciousness, and perhaps it can, you know, feed into the happiness index of the human species.
You could certainly use
So
more of
that's,
that.
yeah, that's where I am, and I've been working with Mark since the beginning of this project.
Lovely.
And Sandra and Shannon, yeah.
Thank you. So Sandra and or Shannon, do you want to follow up on anything Mark said about the primary goals of WPD?
Sure. Yeah, I can just tie in a little there. And probably heard this in our recent celebration of World Psychedelic this past June. But the number one goal is really to get the day recognized by the UN. So we're really striving for that. And at least within the next 5 years, we hope that that become a reality. So when we had initially started WPD, that was the goal. It still is the goal. And within the next 5 years, we hope to definitely achieve that. It would be nice by our 5th year anniversary next year. However, I think it's realistic to give at least 5 years. And then just really to have everyone take the day and make it their own and celebrate the day. So for example, like you did with Spirit Plant Medicine, you had a webinar on the day. I know that the Psychedelic Association of Canada also did so. So just having different organizations that are already involved in psychedelic medicine to be making the day their own and really just celebrating it that way, thereby increasing awareness and just making it really a global event.
Excellent. Sandra, do you have anything to add at this point before we move along?
I think both Mark and Shannon did a great job. I mean, sometimes there's a little bit of confusion about what's the Psychedelic Awareness Foundation versus what's World Psychedelics Day. Psychedelic Awareness Foundation is, of course, the nonprofit that was the origin of World Psychedelics Day, and World Psychedelics Day is actually, of course, the day. So the Psychedelic Awareness Foundation puts forward the day, but obviously in alignment with bringing forth psychedelic awareness and creating conversations like these. So thank you for having us.
Yeah, well, it's really great to hear that people are doing these kinds of things, that you folks are doing these kind of things.
Well, and I want to jump in there for a second, if I may, Stephen, because I know Shannon had spoke of, you know, the program we did in you know, it was last minute, and we brought it together, and it was something I've wanted to do for a while, is to have real people share their real stories of their psychedelic experience and the transformation that you know that they have and how it's changed their lives. And I think that that's one of the most you know, research is important. There's a lot of great work being done in terms of the history and the learning and how to use things in a safe, sacred way. And I find it very impactful myself, specifically when you hear the way that these medicines have helped people, because I think that's the social proof. It's one thing for us to be talking about these things and sharing the word, but I think it's equally as powerful when people who have really transformational experiences share that, you know, so because they're not all doctors and academics and speakers, and they're real people. You know, we're real people too, though I think there's an impact that is, more relatable to the average viewer or listener, or I refer to them as people who are seekers. They're looking for different tools. So I want to thank you for, the inspiration to actually launch that program. It's something we're going to do more of because it was really quite well received. So thank you.
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so true, Mark. What you're saying. The transformative power of psychedelics is, struck me after that my first weekend of exposure to them, where there were about 3 of them in a row, all different, that I was offered, and the thing that I noticed driving back from this festival was that since I was 18 years old, I had suffered this kind of low-level depression, and it just lifted, and I went, oh my God, I didn't know what it felt like to not have that hanging over me.
Beautiful.
And I thought, man, this is too good to be true, and I really started doing some research into it, and that's what got me started and involved and curious. And as a filmmaker, I wanted to bring whatever skills I had, and so I've supported a number of documentaries now that explain and advocate and clearly demonstrate the power, the transformative power of psychedelics in people's lives.
Nice. Yeah. So here's a question. It's going to start with a statement, but it will bleed into a question. Terence McKenna, back in his day, when talking like mostly, I don't know, 80s more than any time, I think, would give an address. I don't know if he did this every year or not, but he called it the State of the Onion, a play on the President's State of the Union address, and just discussing like how is the psychedelic renaissance, which didn't actually exist as a term at that point, but nonetheless, how is that coming along, or how is the awakening journey for the species altogether coming along? So I would like to ask any of you to weigh in on how you see the development of the State of the Onion at this point, like over the last several years, or even projecting into the future. What do you see having happened, and possibly, how do you envision where this renaissance, if we can call it that, is going? Anyone want to jump in on that one? Okay, then I'm going to call on you. Go, Sandra.
I'll dive. I'll go in. Well, I mean, I think that's a really challenging question, and I think just the fact that we're having this conversation shows how much things have shifted, that we're taking these conversations more seriously, that we're not just thinking about psychedelics as a pure recreational in the West, in the global North. We're starting to actually recognize indigenous traditions and the origins of these medicines, whereas before we didn't actually not only recognize them, we actually were destroying a lot of these histories, and to now not just recognize the therapeutic potential, but the traditional spiritual uses of these medicines, and having open, honest conversations like never before speaks volumes. I think what also speaks volumes is the fact that the war on drugs has clearly failed, and I think people see that. And I think people also see very clearly through the benefits of science, the benefits are there. At least in the United States, in order to be Schedule 1, there has to be no therapeutic potential, and there clearly is. And even though there's still debate about, how we go about this regulation wise, decrim is becoming more and more of a thing, at least in different parts of the world, and more and more legal access and more use. And with the internet, of course, changing everything, people know about it. You can't hide this information, and how it's shifting consciousness and how it's changing people's lives, including even the risks and the harms and the risks involved in psychedelics and plant medicine. So both, sort of like the best of times, it was the worst of times. We were seeing the best of the potential starting to really come to clarity, as well as the historical use and traditional use, but we're also seeing some of the risks like never before. And I think it's a very powerful time, and just so important to have the Psychedelic Awareness Foundation and World Psychedelics Day on a global scale to be recognized, because it is, in fact, a worldwide tradition, a worldwide benefit, and is changing our consciousness, whether or not we recognize it or not.
Well said. So before putting that question to any of the other three of you who would like to answer it, I want to add a little bit more in line somewhat with what you just said. Is it pronounced Sandra or Sandra, by the way?
Either, just not Sandy.
Okay, sure. Yeah. So Robert is not Bob either. Yeah. Anyway. So, in terms of the state of the onion issue, like how have things developed to here, and where are we now, and where are we going? I just want to add in terms of what you might say to that question, you other three, that there, in certain circles, there are some distinct concerns about how this psychedelic renaissance is developing. For example, that it might become too much in the control of corporations and profit taking and stuff like that, that it might become too much in the control of established medical authorities and made less available to people, those two in particular. And then this might be adding too much for one question, but just in case there's room to squeeze it in, there's also research that indicates that psychedelics in themselves do not necessarily result in life changes. It requires a lot of integration of one kind or another. So would the rest of you like to weigh in on this now somewhat expanded, hopefully not over-bloated question?
I think, like many cultural events in the world, I was talking to a 19-year-old last night about this project in a bar, and he said, all of us microdose psychedelics. And I said, why? And he said, because, it's a way of coping with the anxiety of our times. It's controllable. It's fascinating. It's elucidating. And it's part of my culture at 19. He's from London. And it's just integrated in a sort of expanded mind. So whether, the stock market or pharmacology takes over this zone, they don't care. They're doing their own experimental things with microdosing psychedelics. And that was a very interesting conversation. He knows how to be safe. He knows to, he's not doing it because he's partying all day long. He's doing it consciously because it helps him expand his world.
Nice.
And he said that's true of many artists and intellectuals and ordinary people say, he was from London. But I think that's interesting, and it'll always endure that, persistence of vision, whatever the market does or pharmacology does with it.
Good point.
And that's the nature of counterculture.
Yeah. Absolutely, yeah. The right change can come from the people. Shannon, do you have anything to say about this question that I've sort of thrown at you guys?
Well, the only thing that I have to say is I think that it will definitely balance itself out. I often compare it to what happened in the world of yoga in terms of yoga being westernized. Those of us that were trained in classical traditional yoga kind of saw progress over the past 20 years, where it's now it's highly commercialized, highly westernized. And you find a lot of people are now going back to yoga's roots and really trying to get that traditional inner consciousness, evolution of consciousness out of it. So even if psychedelics does go into the far end of, being corporatized or commercialized or whatnot, I'm not a, social scientist or anything like that, but just intuitively, I hope or figure that it will balance itself out and will eventually get back to its roots. And I think that's what really we're working with WPD, is to celebrate the evolution of psychedelics coming to the masses, the celebration that there is some good in science, but also really just remembering the roots of psychedelics and where the medicines come from and the spirits of the medicine and the knowledge keepers of the medicine, and really just honoring every aspect of that. So I think everything ends up coming back into balance, and I think whatever happens, it's definitely going to balance itself out.
Good. Thank you.
I think it's an important issue that you raised, Stephen, and I think you know, to stop the commercialization of it would be to overthrow capitalism, but
which should happen,
which is a worthy a worthy goal in itself. But part of the what's going on is like the hard work that MAPS has done for 30 years, trying to get FDA approval of MDMA, and finally getting breakthrough therapy designation, and I would say that legalization is certainly on the horizon. They've had a recent setback, but it's inevitable. Eventually, it's inevitable. And what happens with legalization, in part, as it has with marijuana, what you get is a safe supply, and what's written on the tin is actually what's in the tin, as it were. And we've just had the number of deaths in where I live in Vancouver, resulting from an unsafe supply, it's just horrendous. How many people are dying from not knowing what's actually in the drugs that they're taking. And that's not just heroin addicts in alleys. That's people, literally a friend of mine in Seattle, their 18-year-old son was celebrating his birthday. It was the pandemic. He was on the phone with a buddy of his. They both took a pill at the same time, and the next morning he didn't wake up. And his parents were very drug aware. I'm not sure exactly what he thought he was taking, but whatever it was, it killed him. And that's just tragic. And so I think we have to think about the benefits of regulation and easy access to testing. There's a place in Vancouver that we have is it's a street front, a storefront operation. It's free. You can walk in with anything, a very tiny amount of whatever you want tested, and 5 minutes later you've got what's it called, a spectro analysis. I can't quite remember what the technical name is, but you can get an extremely accurate idea of what's in that pill or that capsule that you've got, and that's so important, especially for until we have a regulated general supply. The supply is going to be underground.
Yeah, well put. And that place, by the way, is Dana Larson's brainchild.
Thank you.
East Hastings, yeah. So 2 or 3 times during the conversation, and also in the mission statement that you guys read before we went live here, there was a reference to indigenous people and indigenous knowledge, and perhaps by implication, indigenous inclusion. Shannon, I think it was in your last answer, said something about the knowledge keepers of these medicines and so on. So the question again for all of you is what is the importance? How important? What is the nature of the importance of recognizing, honoring, and including these traditional medicine keepers and traditional cosmologies of indigenous people from many parts of the planet, actually? Anyone? Go, Sandra. I can see you ready to speak.
I'm the backup singer. I'm always willing to chime in.
Sing us the truth then.
Yeah, especially since I do ethics, I guess it's my job. But well, I mean, At least I'll speak for myself, at least, in terms of why is it important to consider and recognize indigenous traditions and medicinal use? It's because that's where we got these medicines from. That's where a lot of, I mean, like I can't think of a single psychedelic that even if you want to point to the synthetics like LSD, right? It was because of traditional use of ergot in midwifery that was even being studied for science because of its ability to help clot the blood during childbirth. That they were studying it, and then we derived LSD from one of the study of the components by Albert Hoffman. Of course, we were mentioning about that bicycle day holiday, a different holiday, 419. And this is just it. We have so much detachment from these histories because of colonialization, because of the global north. We try and even in terms of how we've come to understand, like for instance, mushrooms and taking from Maria Sabina, a very well-known case. We have not had a tradition of honoring and respecting traditional medicines, traditional ways, as well as traditional and First Nations. We need to do reparation and repair, as well as recognition of the knowledge and the wisdom keepers, as well as preserve these wisdom and knowledge, even if that's not what you identify with. That it's important to recognize and to attribute appropriately and not appropriate these traditions. That it really is for me a really basic ethical issue, not just in terms of historical recognition, but current recognition, as well as they have the histories and the wisdom and the knowledge and how to work with these medicines. We are new to working with psychedelics and plant medicines, especially in terms of altering our consciousness and creating greater awareness. There's more of a history with these traditions for hundreds of years, if not, thousands, depending upon who you're talking about, that has it in there and have lived with it in relationship with plant spirits, with plant medicines, and not necessarily all psychedelic. Cacao, chocolate that we use every day, we've detached it from its relationship to Mother Cacao. We've detached our relationship from other plant medicines as well. And I think there's a calling back to consciousness, a calling back to relationship within ourselves, and a calling back to recognizing these traditions.
Excellent. And
Well said.
I would say
Well,
that even implies a deeper, broader perspective of
Yes.
many indigenous people, of their relationship to plant and planet and spirit altogether being a necessary part of this conversation. Mark, did you want to say something?
Yeah, in one of the things you were saying there, it reminded me of a conversation Stephen and I had with Melinda Araccio about a year and a half ago or so, who was a speaker at our conference. And we were asking her the question about, how do we circumvent this cultural appropriation and what's going on with that? And she said something that I thought was really brilliant. And she said it's about cultural appreciation, not appropriation. And I thought it was just a nice, change up of words to put the appreciation into it. And, we talked about capitalism and the commercialized side of psychedelics. And, at some point, profit does give us resources, but it shouldn't be to make some guy or gal or person's, filthy rich. It's about how do we share these gifts of nature with more people in a safe, sacred setting, which I think is really important. Because as Mark was saying, everybody's different, and we need to know that we're doing these things in a safe way. So I think that there's something to be said for, the appreciation of it. And lastly, just to comment on when you're talking about it's not just psychedelics, and spirit plant medicine, I know, is mostly about psychedelics, but I believe all plants are medicine, and the best pharmacy in the world is nature. And a friend of mine told me one time she works with sugar and sugar addiction. Anytime you take something green and make it white, it's a drug. So sugar is a drug, as she related to cocaine from coca leaf. So I think it's really important that we understand nature in a whole different way because we've lost it in this Western world. We're in a concrete jungle versus communing with nature in the forest. So anyways, that's my 2 bits.
Yeah,
What-
I'm going to
what got
cheer
me
that on
thinking.
as someone who actually literally lives in the redwood forest.
Yeah.
It makes
So I'd
all
like,
the world a difference.
yeah, I'd like to put this question, the same question about inclusion, recognition, respect, and so on and so on, for indigenous knowledge, wisdom, keepers, etc., to Shannon and also to Mark.
Well, just coming out of what Mark was just saying, there has to be just a basic respect for the indigenous cultures and the plants, physically the plants themselves, because as the psychedelic renaissance grows and grows, uh, all of a sudden it becomes cool to do peyote, right? But peyote is like an extremely limited resource. I think it takes 20 years to grow a peyote plant to fruition. And if it's not properly harvested, if it's just kind of hacked out of the ground, it's not going to grow back. And so there's this huge depletion because of this growing demand. And all of us, at a certain point, we got to go leave it to the people whose territory that it's on. That's for them to use. We can find our own mushrooms wherever we live. We can plants that are and we can get to those psychedelic mind states in other ways. We don't have to satisfy our curiosity of trying every substance out there just because, so we just got to show some basic respect for those cultures and their tending of those plants. And you can't mass produce that stuff, and there are synthetic equivalents, and we should there's people torturing toads, just to scrape the DMT off their backs, and there's synthetic DMT, and I think it'd be probably pretty hard pressed to perceive the difference in the experience, and so yeah,
That's what I'm hearing.
For nature and for the communities and for the animals.
Well, I'm having to restrain myself from giving a long monologue now. I won't, because I want to hear from Shannon on this, but I do want to say that I really appreciate you bringing up the peyote example, Mark, because I was a frequent participant in Native American church peyote prayer ceremonies for about 12 years, and I've studied about it and so on and so on. And it's, among other things, referred to as a keystone species, which is defined, as I understand it, as a medicine or a substance or a plant that is essential to the cultural context of the people who work with it. And I'll try to keep this as brief as possible. It's the peyote and its cosmology and its use in the Native American church, in particular, maybe the Huichol or Wixárika people in Mexico also, they have managed to protect it more or less in a way that is unique. I just personally pray that it stays that way, because, for example, Ken Littlefish, who ran a lot of the meetings that I went to, this guy had to take phone sales jobs sometimes to make it through the month, because he had a contract with the spirit never to take money for what he did. And so he was always poor, but they never charged for those meetings. They would pass the hat around in the morning, but they wouldn't charge. So and I've experienced a number of different containers for this kind of work: the mestizo shamanist way of working with ayahuasca, the Santo Daime way of working with ayahuasca, etc., 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 over many years. And the container that the Native American church people hold, or at least the ones I encountered, is unparalleled, and it needs to be protected like a rare, precious jewel. So anyway, enough of that diatribe. Shannon, you probably have more to say on this issue, if you would, please.
I'll be quick with it, but I'll take it more, I guess, from a safety perspective, because Sandra and Mark did a really good job of covering all of the other areas of it. So when we're looking at safety, I guess I could, how woo-woo am I allowed to get here?
Oh,
As
totally.
woo as you'd like.
We're the woo-woo people.
So when we're looking at traditional medicines, I don't really necessarily mean safety in terms of like the physical realm or even the mental realm, because the shamans usually have that looked after. But there are issues of safety when you're working with traditional medicines and you're working with spirit in the other realms. So for example, in the Vedic lineage, there's 5 different koshas, and just the mental and physical are like the last 2 koshas of earth of our, you know, that we can consciously see. Whereas there's 3 other koshas of existence beyond that. And typically when there's an issue or a disease, those issues or diseases would start in the causal, the astral realms, and then eventually end up in the physical realms, which is what we treat in Western medicine, physical and mental. So that said, if you're working with a medicine and you're not working with those higher realms, it could be very unsafe, because you could have all kinds of different things come into that space. And if you have someone who's not a trained shaman, who knows how to handle those aspects, it could definitely just be a very bad situation. I've heard stories of like spirits coming in and leaving one body and going into someone else's body, and then they leave and they're dealing with all these issues. So it can be very unsafe, and I don't know how far I want to go on that, but I'll maybe leave it there, that these wisdom keepers are trained from a very young age because of their ability to see past Maya, the veil, and they're able to and trained to work with these spirits. And I know people who are even trained and won't work with them just because they don't want to have to deal with those certain types of attachments. So that said, I'll leave that there. Safety is very important, and it's important that we have these knowledge keepers pass their knowledge down on how to properly and safely work with these medicines. And I'll also kind of use that as a segue into why I also think it's important to have science, is because there's certain aspects that science can bring in terms of safety when it comes to, you know, dosage, or we have so many different things going on where people are taking different medications now. So just having someone trained as like a pharmacist who knows how different molecules interact to make sure that it's, you know, safe when mixing different molecules, et cetera, or if someone's on certain medications, to have that. And then just, you know, having it safe for all people to take no matter what. So I guess I'll stay in the safety realm and toot that horn there.
Yeah, that was so important what you said, in my view. No, not just my view. It was so important that you spoke about the way that you understand. If you're going to lead ceremonies, if you're going to be a guide like that, you have to have that kind of background and training. I'm hearing a lot about that. I think it's a problem in the culture that there are a lot of people that, you know, think they know more than they know, way more than they know. You know, just one really simple example is the Icaros, the songs that the ayahuasqueros sing. They are. I've been told by one of the leading ayahuasqueros down in Peru, Ricardo Amaringo, that that those are like spirit beings that come in and say, "I'm the person. I mean, I'm the song for this person now." Right? If you don't know that, if you're just making up songs or playing recorded music or something, you are missing a huge aspect of that. And as you implied quite correctly, or you know, directly, it can be dangerous. That's a whole other time. We could have a whole other hour-long conversation about that, because I'm hearing more and more about people that are getting wounded by psychedelics that they didn't do them in the safe circumstances. You are opening yourself up
it can be
to
dangerous.
a vast
That's a whole
realm
other we could have a
of
whole other
alternate
hour-long
beings.
conversation
Really,
about that.
you know. Anyway, Mark had said we need to end fairly soon. Mark, do we have time for them, either of the other two, to weigh in more on this one, or do we want to get to the last
Yeah, we've
question,
got about,
basically how they can be involved in World Psychedelics Day?
Well, let's have a quick wrap up of the question you just asked, Stephen, then we'll dive in and close up with your final thoughts there.
Mark, do you want to add to that at all?
Yeah,
I did want to. We're kind of.
let's have a quick
It's
wrap up
almost
of the
like we're
question you
leading
just asked,
to.
Stephen,
You've got
then
to go to
we'll dive in
Peru
and close
to
up
have
with
the authentic
final thoughts.
experience, and I think you know, shamans. It's okay for shamans to be trained and to travel to do that, but I think we have to think about the environmental consequences of psychedelic tourism. You know, that I don't have to, you know, do a two-way long-haul flight to Peru to have a psychedelic experience. You know, you can do it in your pretty much in your backyard, almost anywhere. And but you do have to do it, of course, with somebody who's trained and who really knows what they're doing. So I just want to put in that word for the environment.
No, I think that's a good point. We need to get more people that are properly trained working all over the world, really.
Yeah.
Sandra, do you have anything further to say on this topic?
I agree. I thought I'd be simple this time. but safety and all these things are such an important factor, and all of what we've talked about shows why World Psychedelics Day is so important, why we advocate for creating more awareness, not just about traditional use, but about modern use, combining both the benefits that we can gain from scientific and therapeutic use as well as spiritual practice, which I think should be talked about more. And I really appreciate that came up towards the end of this conversation. So thank you again for helping to make this conversation successful and bringing more awareness.
Well, thank you.
Well,
That would be a natural segue, perhaps. Oh, go ahead, Mark.
I was just going to say,
one more question.
yeah, no, I just want to comment on your comment about the spiritual side of psychedelics, and I think that you know, for almost in most healing, the spiritual side is where the healing comes from. And psychedelics are a tool to open up that channel. And I think psychedelics, or really any kind of personal growth and healing, at some point there is a spiritual component to it. So I'm glad that you did acknowledge that, because to me, the thought of psychedelics in a clinical environment doesn't work for the way I kind of roll. And after experiencing some ceremonies and the tradition that comes in through that is a very, very powerful experience.
And yet the irony is that even like research at Johns Hopkins in this clinical setting was part of what supported the idea that it was through the sort of spiritual or these sort of life-altering experiences that were showing to be most correlative with success in the longer term. That people who, even though you're not guaranteed to have a spiritual experience on these psychedelics, especially in the clinical setting, that there is a correlation between what has been indicative of a success in terms of, like smoking cessation study, that landmark study that a lot of people do.
Yeah, of course. There are many different ways to work with these, with the right kind of drugs and so, speaking of spiritual growth, Mark, can any of you or all of you say something about the spiritual growth of World Psychedelics Day? How can people get involved? How can we help this develop?
Mark, you want to take
Well, looks like we lost Mark. Is he still here?
Oh, Mark's still here?
I see. Where'd he go?
Intermittent connection. Thanks to Elon Musk. But Shannon, why don't you go for this?
Yeah, I can start. Well, we definitely want people to be interested and we want people to be involved. And there's many ways that people can be involved. So first of all, if you're watching this and you're interested in collaborating, send us an email, go to the website, see how you can do that. If you're interested in volunteering, again, send us an email, go to the website. If you have some ideas for WPD celebrations happens in the future, let us know. We're just starting the planning for 2025, and we hope to have that launched very soon here. So really just contact us, let us know you're interested. We'd love to hear from you, and we'd love to hear your ideas. So go to the website.
Any additions to that, Mark or Sandra?
Yeah, well, our hope is not to put the focus on us so much in our little organization. You know, we're just a little volunteer group of people, but it's really for other people and other organizations to adopt the day, to use the day, to anchor an event, to use it as an excuse to talk to mainstream media about psychedelics. They love to have, you know, a day or some kind of focus, a hook for a story, and so it just, you know, take the day and run with it is what is our message.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, yeah, as you can tell, we are very much a white privileged group. And if you don't make it your day, it will literally not fulfill our mission of World Psychedelics Day. And I think if you've had a beneficial experience with psychedelics, if you are from a traditional lineage, if you're curious, all the things that we mentioned in that statement, we just really encourage you to, you know, educate yourself, to connect to others, and celebrate, like, you know, how we recognize Earth Day. And I think we could do better with celebrating and recognizing the Earth still. So just similarly, like, let's recognize and celebrate our own benefits that we've received, honor, acknowledge, appreciate in ways that we haven't been doing so in the past with traditional medicines, as well as appreciate what it's done in our own lives.
Excellent. Well, I'm personally really excited to hear what you folks are doing, so thank you very much for this, and may it be blessed as you go forward. Mark, you want to round things up?
Yeah, I just want to thank you all for joining us today and sharing your mission and your passion, because, you know, we are linked together here with our common interests and purpose to, you know, help create a better everyday life in the world and for humanity. And for that, I think psychedelics and plant medicines are a fantastic tool. And I love that you made a day about it, because like you were saying, you know, you have an Earth Day, everything's got a day now, that you know, why not psychedelics, and, you know, other than just bicycle day, and anything to help share the word and to get people connected and cooperating and collaborating and co-creating, so that we can make the world a better place, even if it's one person at a time and one experience at a time. And I know that we're committed to every year now doing something for World Psychedelics Day. And really, my goal is I want to share more stories of real people and real experiences and real transformation, because I think that that'll really help make a difference in the world. That people know that there's an opportunity for healing and for transformation. So thank you very much. And thank you, Stephen, for joining us as well.
Yeah, Mark contacted me like an hour before. Said, join us on this.
Way to show up.
For you, Mark, anything, as long as I'm available. Yeah.
Nice.
Okay.
Well, thanks again, everyone. You've been listening to Conscious Living here on 100.5 FM CFRO in Vancouver. Until next time, take care.
For you, Mark, anything, as long as I'm available. Yeah.
Well, thanks again, everyone. You've been listening to Conscious Living here on 100.5